President Trump just announced a plan to roll out dividend checks to Americans.
President Trump wants to send Americans direct payments. It's not technically a stimulus check like the one sent out during the pandemic, instead giving Americans a share of revenue generated by tariffs.
We're going to issue a dividend to our middle income people and lower income people of about $2,000.
Now, many Americans are struggling and they do need money to pay off high credit card debts. Now, what's your opinion? Do you believe Americans should get this tariff dividend check? Drop your opinion in the comment section, because in this video, I'm going to break down who would be eligible and the time frame that Americans can expect to get this check. And is this even legal? And is it possible for him to do? So we're going to break this all down in this video. Now, if you like this kind of information about credit, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and you can go to my website and download this free heart inquiry removal package. The link is in the description of the video and in the pinned comment section. Now, President Trump is saying from the high cost of living, he would like to reissue some dividend checks from the collection of tariffs. Now, with this plan, not every American would receive these checks. He's saying that high income earners would not qualify, but for middle class and low income earners, here is the breakdown.
Any indication who specifically would qualify for these bonuses?
So there hasn't been like an official plan released or anything. All we've seen was that one post from Truth Social from President Trump. And we don't really know who he considers to be high income. But what we do know is that he plans to use money generated by the tariffs to dish out these bonus checks, or as he's calling them, dividends. And he said the checks would be about $2,000 a pop. Also, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News that the dividend could come in lots of different forms, lots of different ways. So maybe we could even see certain tax cuts. But there's also the possibility they could be like that stimulus check that we saw.
Still remains to be seen. But yeah, that definitely came to mind.
Now, as you can see in this clip, they mentioned Scott Bessent, which is the U.S. Treasurer, is saying that this can come in many forms. And one of the forms can be a tax credit. Now, with that, I don't know if I like that as much as a direct payment, because with this tax credit, you know, how are they going to give this out or consider what is a high income earner? Are they going to look at your gross income or your adjusted tax liability income for what will be the decision of who get these checks? And when it comes to filing taxes, is some things going to be included, excluded? You know, they can have a lot of little variations that may disqualify you. So in my opinion, I believe if they're going to pay people out, it should be a direct payment like the other stimulus. And that's just it. You know, I do understand with some people, if they're higher income, it might not qualify, but I don't like, you know, some other this and that. Just give people a direct payment if you're going to issue out these checks. And what are these other forms of payments that he's mentioning? No, we just need a straight check.
Looking at whether these tariffs have generated enough revenue to pay for all of these dividends, what is the outlook?
So at this point, it doesn't look like they would have the money or the means to do that right now, but potentially in the near future. So according to the Committee for a Responsible Budget, the tariffs generated around $195 billion in fiscal year 2025. And according to the U.S. Census, around 173 million Americans made less than $100,000 in 2023. So that would add up to about $346 billion if they were to cut, you know, those $2,000 checks for each of those people. However, the Tax Foundation predicts that the tariffs are going to generate around $1.8 trillion over the next 10 years. So in the future, it seems like there would be enough to cover those $2,000 dividends that Trump is suggesting. We're just going to have to wait and see how it all plays out, especially with the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. That's a good point.
Now, officially, this isn't enough revenue right now from the collection of the tariffs to technically cover the cost of these checks. Now, I'll be honest, I surely would take a $2,000 payment, but what this might mean that they're going to advance this money. Now, the difference between this and stimulus, with a stimulus check, you have to actually get permission from Congress in order to print additional money, which mean you're borrowing money from the Fed. Now, with that, it has an interest rate attached to it that we're all responsible to pay back. Now, with Trump plan, with this dividend, that would not be the case. You would get the money without the U.S. people having the responsibility of paying back interest to the Fed. But yet and still, it's a gamble if you have not collected this money, you know, this tax revenue as of yet. But on the flip side, most people are going to spend this money and put it right back into the economy. And that can lead itself to more profits for businesses and more tax revenue that would come in, and that would boost the economy. Now, the thing with that, it would come without us paying back interest to the Fed. But this also could lead to higher costs because we're bringing money that is not in our economy back in from other countries. So, this is going to be a touch and go situation. And if the Supreme Court actually knock down some of those tariffs and say they were illegal for Trump to actually ask for those tariffs or to put those tariffs on in certain situations, then it's still not enough money. You may not get issued these checks. So this is still a touch and go situation. And in a couple of weeks, we got to hear what the Supreme Court is going to say about this matter. And let's deal with the timing on when we may see these checks. If Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasurer, is mentioning tax credits or rebates, that's around February. So that would be the time frame. And it could make sense if the Supreme Court does not knock those tariffs down, because at that time of year, the government has more tax revenue, is the highest around that season. That's why they actually give tax return rebates at that time. So it may make sense.
These checks for low and middle income Americans, that would add up to about $346 billion.
Yeah.
What about Congress? What's the role here of them?
So Congress obviously has the power of the purse, but things have gotten a little bit tricky with this new administration and the ways that laws are interpreted. Hence, the Supreme Court having to decide whether these tariffs were legal in the first place. Regardless of all of that, though, under current law, tariff money goes into the U.S. Treasury's general fund. It's treated like any other tax revenue. So to turn that into direct payments, Congress would have to pass legislation authorizing those dividends, just like lawmakers did for those stimulus checks that we all got in 2020.
Now, President Trump would not be able to do this on his own. He still will have to see Congress, and his party is in control of Congress right now. Now, the Republican Party is the party of the so-called fiscal responsibility. So would they actually want to issue out these checks before using that money to pay off the obligations that the United States already have is a whole nother question. Well, I'm quite sure he can put pressure on his party. And around February and that time, midterms is coming up next year. So they may want to burn that in the minds of American people that they were the ones that issued out these payments. So that may make them look a little more favorable around election time. And they can use that as leverage, because if the Democratic Party are against those payments, most people in the position now will probably be pretty upset if they think they're the ones that's holding up some money that they can get to better their situation. So he may have a good shot of getting this through. But that leads to the question, can this and have this been done before? And here's some of those details, if this have ever been done in history.
This idea specifically, has this ever been done in American history?
The research that I did today, it doesn't seem like this specifically has been done, but there have been times that the feds returned money to the public, but it was always almost through Congress. So the closest parallels would be those COVID stimulus checks, also the tax rebates in 2001 and also 2008, those economic stimulus payments that happened. The only true dividend model in the U.S. exists actually at the state level in Alaska, where oil revenues from state-owned lands are invested and then paid out to residents through this Alaska Permanent Dividend Fund, which I thought was really interesting.
That is an interesting potential connection. We'll see how far this goes. Emma, thank you so much.
Now, one of the closest examples of this being done is in Alaska, and that's from the oil revenues that they pay back to the citizens and the residents there in Alaska. But the Trump administration feel that they have enough revenues where they can pull this off to send out these checks. But some economists is saying this can lead to a higher cost of living. And here are these two opinions from the Trump administration and economists that see these in two different spectrums of whether or not this is doable.
Just last month, the president said tariff revenue would first be used to pay some of America's $38 trillion debt.
Number one, we're paying down debt because People have allowed the debt to go crazy.
When we studied the matter in the summer, that we thought that deficit reduction might be the best use of those monies, but we've had a big surge in tax revenues. You've seen even a bit surplus in the latest monthly Treasury report.
Experts at the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget say this doesn't add up.
The reality is we have surpluses in tax collection months. So we have surpluses in April, we have surpluses in September. Overall, there's no surge in revenue. And what we're seeing is deficits are still trucking along at about $2 trillion a year. Tariffs that President Trump has enacted, when they're in full effect, are going to raise about $300 billion a year. That's a lot of money. But sending every American or every American that's not high income $2,000 would cost $600 billion.
Pumping that much money into the economy would likely make inflation worse. Now, if the Supreme Court decides that most of the president's tariffs are unconstitutional, the committee forecasts it would take 7 years for the remaining tariffs to generate enough revenue to pay Americans $2,000 dividends.
Now, in my view, if we can get some payments, we're all happy about that. Who's against that? And right now, many Americans have really high credit card debt because of the cost of inflation. That's been beating down throughout the years right now. So it was going on even last year. It's just been really high. And the year prior to that, and, inflation's been up. So these payments can help. And many people have other debts that they need to pay, credit card debts, some outstanding debts that is even coming up. And when it comes down to collections and charge-offs, sometimes you're better off by disputing those items than paying them off. Now, with my elite credit system users like Greg, he was able to remove a collection in 12 days. So if you need my help, the link to my AI software and my credit coaching is in the description of the video and in the pinned comment section if you do need my help with these situations. Now, when it comes down, is it going to cause more inflation? That's going to need to be seen. We really have no set precedent of this kind of nationwide dividend check. This is different than stimulus. Now, stimulus did make inflation go higher and it added to our national debt. Now, with this dividend check, you're not really borrowing this money from the Fed. This is money that was already printed, and other nations also buy and receive American dollars because the US dollar is the world currency. So they need it for trade, not only with us, but for other countries. But in the same token, the United States is the only country that get to export their inflation. So having all these dollars coming back in our economy, that can possibly drive up the cost of living because now you have more dollars in circulation. And what I always tell you guys is not the cost of your items that you're buying going up. It is the purchasing power of your dollar going down. That's why I actually trade out my dollars with gold and silver. This gold and silver is stopping some of the erosion of your purchasing power, and you can store some of your economic effort because these are precious metals. And when it comes down to precious metals, there's a limited supply. This is why you're seeing record high numbers for silver and gold. And I will tell you guys, out the two, I'll go for the silver. It's probably the best value because gold is extremely expensive now. And I switch out my US dollars for some silver and gold. If you want to do that, you can check out Quicksilver, and they have a wealth building program, and you just set what you want for how much money that you're trying to get some gold and silver, and they will send it to you. So that can be a way to protect yourself, but we will see. In my opinion, yeah, I want to check if I can get one. And I hope it's like the other stimulus that maybe even with your kids, let us get $2,000 per person because we do need that change. And heck, we're paying higher costs because of these tariffs anyway. So yeah, let's reel some of our money back up in here and let's do it. I'm all for it. Well, you guys drop your opinion, but that's my breakdown. So hopefully this information was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section. But more detailed questions, you can go to my website and all your questions go directly to my cell phone. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Stay tuned.